welcome to Take Time. I'm your host, Patrick Marlette, and let's talk about the Reverie GT. This is part 2, our in-depth review of the piece, and if you're not familiar with the channel, I do these 2-part reviews here. The first part is an unboxing and first impression, and the second part, which is what we have today, is an in-depth review after a week in the life. In that first part, I let you guys ask any questions, comments, or concerns regarding the item that is in for review, so you can have those questions answered here on the show. So if you do want to follow along and ask questions as these 2-part series come up, feel free to subscribe to the channel. But for the review item today, there was a handful of questions regarding this timepiece. I think the thing that bothered most was potentially the literature. The things that you don't really pick up on, however, are details regarding the case unless you have this piece in person. So I'm mostly going to harp on about that. But before we delve into the review, as with all my reviews here on the channel, I like to start with the bad and then move on to the good before giving you my final opinion of the review item. First and foremost, because this is a common theme between all of Sam's watches, the guilloche patterning on the dial. Now, I'd like to preface this by stating that I talked to Sam about this, and he says that this is a stylistic choice. But if we were to take a look at our Reverie GT down here, you might notice that the guilloche patterning is at a slight angle. And it's most apparent when you are looking at the text, either Reverie or GT. You'll notice that the guilloche patterning, which is the center braid-like patterning of the dial, is at an angle. And I have to say, I'm really not a fan of this execution. I don't think it makes for a good look overall. It was something that passed me on the unboxing and first impression, but after wearing it day to day, something just felt off about the dial, and I realized it was because it was at a slight angle. I cannot shake that feeling. And mind you, it's not just my copy. If you look at the production shots on the website, and of course I'll leave a link to Reverie watches in the description down below, you'll notice that even in the production photos, they all have a slight angle to them. So it was definitely by choice. I don't necessarily agree with that choice. I don't think it looks good overall for this watch face, but I'm glad that Sam made this choice and that it was a choice and not just a defect. So that is a good note in and of itself. But overall, you just can't help but feel there's something off with this dial when you look at it. And that's why, or at least I can't. What do you all think? I don't know. Is it perfectly appropriate to have these sort of tight patterns at slight angles to sort of throw off your eye? Is it just me? Am I crazy? Maybe I'm crazy. I've said some crazy things on the show. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys feel, or if you can even tell. I'm going to get another close-up here so you guys can see, but it really threw me off. Maybe not so much everyone else, but it really threw me off. You see what I'm talking about? You see it? Anyways. Another bad note. VK64. I'm not going to talk about the 24-hour sub-dial. I feel like I'm probably going to have a lot of VK64s here on the channel. I think that is a common movement for most micro brands to jump to because it is very affordable to get in bulk. And it just makes a good looking watch for the most part. But with the VK64, you'll note that it comes with a date wheel, or maybe not, but the VK64 comes with a date wheel. So there is always a first step to quick set the date here. This has a phantom step because of that. So what is a phantom step? Well, so this is the 0 at rest position, right? When it's against the body. If I were to pull this out, you might even hear it. You hear that? You can hear the date wheel that is still inside the movement, warbling around as I turn it, as it's quick setting, likely for that 6 o'clock position. It's a fault really of the movement if you want to use this in a watch that doesn't have a date window or exhibit a date in any which way. So you're always likely going to get that phantom step. I swear I saw a VK64 variant that omitted the phantom step, but it's a little bit of a nuisance. It's not going to bother most, but it's not great. It's not great to have that step there. It's actually kind of annoying. You can live with it, but it is just a fault of having this movement without a date display. Now, the last major fault I have with this watch, and it's a real big one for me because the dial itself is great, and I'll talk about that in my good notes, but because the dial is so complex, I feel like Sam over at Reverie went with a more basic case design. And you can tell it has that 3-step bezel. It has these teardrop or tear-shaped lugs. They go by a few different names, but I like to call them tear-shaped because that is most what they resemble. Now, the only issue here for me is that with so little going on with the case, I expect perfect execution. There's not much by way of detail to draw your eye towards except for those lugs. And when you draw your eyes towards those lugs, you'll notice that there are these lines running parallel with one another where those lugs are cut out of the steel or however they're assembled. I'm not a machinist, by the way. I don't work in case manufacturing. I don't know how this is executed, this particular case. But the lugs rest along the bottom half of the case, and you notice 2 parallel lines that look as though it was a single piece of steel that was cut and shaped to give that tear-shaped presence. And it's not aesthetically pleasing. As a matter of fact, you can see what I'm talking about right there. It's hard to pick up on our B cam, but in person it is extremely prevalent and not aesthetically pleasing. And it's on every single one of these lugs. So all 4 lugs all around the case, you'll notice these sort of machine marks where the lugs appear to have been cut out or placed. Again, not an expert. Maybe you guys know. What is that? I'm not a fan. I'm really not a fan because the one design detail that draws you towards the case draws you towards these lines that really shouldn't be there. I'm just not a fan of the case execution here. It's a real tough sale for me if I'm looking at this, and it's in that $400 region. Mind you, it's on sale right now for $400. I think it retails just a little bit above that. But there are so many items in the market with the VK64 that the market is just ripe with VK64 Mecha Quartz watches that I really do expect perfection if I'm going to buy into that. And these case lines that I'm looking at just cheapen the overall look of the case and do it a huge disservice. And another thing I dislike is the brushing on the sides. Honestly, we could have gone without the brushing and just went with an entirely high polished case. This minor detail just seems like a secondary idea. It shouldn't have been tossed in there at all because there's no other elements to the case that are brushed, rather elements that you see as a wearer and or anyone admiring the watch while it's on your wrist. It just has these random brush strokes on the sides of these lugs, and I'm just not a fan of it. So aesthetically and build-wise, I feel like the case has a lot of faults that diminish the overall quality of the case. That really is my biggest complaint. It's something that was easily overlooked in the first impression, but when you look at the case after a week of use, you clearly can tell that there was something that just went amok. So the detailing and overall case construction were a big miss for me. Not really a fan of how that was done here. I do like the overall style of this watch, however, and I'll go into some good notes on that note. So the first good note I'd like to go over is the overall dial construction. I really do love how the subdials are arranged. Bigger is better in my opinion with subdials. I would always almost have, if it's a dual subdial chronograph, have larger subdials as opposed to smaller ones. They don't look as good aesthetically to me when the subdials are really, really tiny and you have really tiny handsets. You'll see that a lot on older chronographs. And mind you, this is a 40 millimeter width case. So those vintage ones are a little bit smaller. They work in relation to the body, but the construction here looks really good. For a modern chronograph, I think it looks fantastic. I love that pie pan sort of look that those subdials have with the raised exterior of the construction. And overall, with the dial, I think it looks really good without a date. If you can ignore the slant of the gouache patterning, or if that's your thing, you dig that, well, then you'll really like the dial construction. But that's just one of those things I just could not overlook. However, I really do like the construction, and the lume on this watch is aesthetically pleasing. I'm not going to put this in a good and or bad category, but the lume itself doesn't hold very long. It's two-toned, in fact, and I'm going to get you guys a lume shot so you can see what that looks like, but it's not very impressive, the lasting power of the lume. Aesthetically, it's pleasing, but you're not going to see it for very long. And of course, this being a mecha quartz, you get the mechanical look and feel of your mechanical equivalent chronograph. So if you're going to buy into, I'm going to say affordable here, an affordable quartz-based chronograph, you definitely want to shoot for one that's a mecha quartz because it's just going to have a better look and feel to it. There's nothing worse than gummy buttons on a quartz chronograph and then a very slow sweeping seconds hand. At least for me, and that's just my opinion. If you have a digital watch, who cares? But if you're using something that's analog setup, you're going to want to see this sweep. And it's pleasing here, so that is definitely a positive note. Good choice with the VK64. I want to get more mecha quartz watches that are on the market, more mecha quartz chronographs to gauge them all, but as a second 64 on the channel, I'm pretty pleased with it. Also, the total package here is a pretty good deal. You get 2 straps with a travel case. You know, that's pretty fantastic. I feel like that's standard fare for most of these micro brands to send out. Some of them go for more lavish packaging, while others try to get you committed on the buy with giving you awesome travel equipment and or options. And that's always nice. I've pretty much had this on the pebble grain strap the whole time. I preferred it amongst the 2 strap offerings. I thought you can see the gray strap option in our part 1 video, but I thought that one was just a little too mute in tone. It didn't do anything for the watch, nor did it take away anything. It was just a very bland colored strap. Otherwise, it looked aesthetically pleasing. This pebble grain one does a good job pairing up with the panda face here. I liked it much better, so I wore it on this one. But both leather straps were extremely supple and comfortable out of the packing, and that's usually not the case when you get a leather strap on a watch that is sub $500. Usually they're a little bit more stiff, not so comfortable, but it's nice to get that here. Of course, both straps are quick release so that you can switch in and out of them more effectively. It's nice that you don't have to think about getting a strap tool if you're not necessarily the kind of person that likes accessorizing your watch. So quick release pins starting to grow on me. I'm still not a huge fan, but if you're buying into a watch for the first time or not looking to get custom straps that you need to remove and or add via spring bar tool, this is a good way to alleviate that pressure. Plus, no matter how hard you try, unless you're an expert, you will always get little scratch marks in the backs of those lugs. So if you're paranoid about that, the quick release pins are good for avoiding that. So I will say that is a definite pro to having quick release pins on a strap. Now, overall, the biggest complaint I read from you guys is about the cost. The rising cost of everything these days in the watch market, but particularly quartz models. And it doesn't feel justifiable, a lot of the prices out there, just based on component material. You know, sapphire crystal, you're starting to see that in everything now. Stainless steel, the grade of stainless steel being 316, that again is sort of standard fare. So what are you really paying for when you get these packages? Well, you should hopefully be paying for excellent customer service, and Sam has been very receptive and responsive with me. That may vary from customer to customer because I am a reviewer. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt, but you want to get something that's executed to perfection and very enjoyable on the wrist. My only issue here is the execution was not up to snuff when compared to other $400 offerings. And this is what I mean, you know, other people were suggesting just getting a Seagull, and I honestly think that's disposable fashion. I've had a lot of friends that have owned Seagulls that have just fallen apart. I could be wrong. Maybe I'll get one on the Tell me if there's a Seagull automatic watch you guys want me to review, and I'll try to pick one up. But that's why I try to just rely on quartz if I'm going to go for a chronograph sub 400, and that seems to be the ballpark price. I can't say that this is great at that price point, namely for the case finish. I hate seeing those parallel lines on the lugs. It's not flattering or nice at all. I think the execution of the case was just bad on that front. If we can upgrade this case in our Mark II or go with a new factory, I don't know what happened. But, you know, the case, the lugs should be seamless. Like on any and every other watch I own, it's never been an issue. So it stood out like a sore thumb. And I think if you're new to the market buying this, you're not going to care and or notice. But if you are a seasoned collector like myself, you will notice and it will bother you. that's about it, guys. It's on sale currently for $400. I think $350 would be a better price point for this watch, especially after reviewing the other VK64 watch here I had on the channel. That case was impeccable. And I'm not just saying that, like I've compared it with other watches and it was really nice. This one just doesn't live up to that, but at $350 would be fantastic, especially if you like the GT's aesthetic. Not to say that this is the only watch on the market rocking this look, but to get it at sub $400 would be awesome. Again, sub 400, like right around 350, I think would be perfect for these guys. They're all limited per colorway, and of course you can look on the link in the description that I'll leave you guys at those colorway options, but at $350, I think this would be a much better deal. Also, lastly, while we're down here, font is something that's coming up a surprising amount of times here on the channel. You guys care so much more about font choice than I realized. I care when handsets seem too small or large, finishing on the case. There's like things that I look at immediately, so I'm glad you guys bring up things I don't think of immediately. But the font choice here seems fine. Like I like the Reverie text. The GT text I could probably live without. You know, it looks fine there. Someone likened it to another brand. Wing, you likened it to another brand. I forget what that brand was. But it is very similar to that brand. I will agree with you. However, it doesn't really bother me. I think a lot of these watches, like watches today, they're all pretty derivative. You know, if Baselworld this year has taught us anything, watches are becoming extremely derivative of one another, and it's just okay. I don't personally care that the font looks similar to another watch, and nor do I care about the placement, nor like the placement. Again, I can go without the GT at the bottom and just have Reverie at the top. As a matter of fact, I could have gone with the date window at the bottom and been really happy. Maybe like a circular window and or a squared framed window. Again, maybe perhaps for the Mark II, we'll see. At any rate, gang, that is the part 2 review. If I didn't answer any questions that you guys had, feel free to ask them here and I will answer them in the comments section down below. But do you like panda dials? Do you like quartz chronographs? You can also let me know down below in the comments section. And also, if you want to carry this conversation elsewhere, we can talk over on Instagram. My handle is TakeTimePat, and you can also hashtag TakeTimePat if you want to share your watches with me, either collections or if you have a Reverie GT and or other chronographs that you really like in this $400 price range. It's a real sweet spot nowadays for quartz chronographs, so let me know if there are alternatives you think I should be checking out or alternatives you like. Now, gang, if you found this video enlightening or in the least entertaining, feel free to hit that like button. It looks a little something like this guy. If you have friends, forums, or groups that were interested in picking up a quartz chronograph, a modern quartz chronograph, and we're considering the GT, perhaps send them this video first. The review is usually the more important of the two-part videos on determining whether or not a watch was amazing or not. You know, I try not to tell you guys what to buy here on the channel. I hate the list and or categorical kind of videos that tell you what you should get. I think you can make your own decision, but I do help my points here advise you in the right direction. So yeah, if you have a pal that was interested in getting a modern quartz chronograph, maybe send them this video first. And if you are new to the channel, if this is the first two-part video you followed here, well, they pretty much happen every week now. I have a steady supply of watches being sent to me, as well as just items I'm buying that deserve a two-part review. That I sort of set this up as a standard. So if you like following these, feel free to subscribe to this video and you can see as the new two parts come up. Again, the best way to ask and or get those questions answered in our part 2 video is to follow along with our part 1s and ask there. Again, my name is Patrick Marlatt and thank you for the time.